Okay. Hi everyone. So there's no mic, so apologies for talking a little bit loud, but hopefully all of you from the back here as well. So welcome to RESI conference, and thank you so much for attending this panel. We're really excited. I'm honored to be here with an esteemed group of colleagues to talk about AI in healthcare, some of the exciting trends, and hopefully answer some of your questions. So there are more chairs up front. If you're in the back, you'd like to come and sit, and we'll get started. So why don't we start with the introduction? We'll go around the table, maybe starting from the back, Ethan, and tell a little bit about yourself and fun, and then we get to the panel.
Sure. Hi everyone, my name is Ethan. I'm currently with a fund called 11.2 kilometer per second is the escape velocity from Earth. So we find ourselves in investing in breakthrough technologies and emerging technologies. The fund does invest across 3 different verticals. The vertical I focus on the fund is what we call data-driven healthcare. That's really looking at the intersection of technology and computation with healthcare and life sciences. So we have invested in digital health companies, as well as computational biology companies. Some example companies include Ginkgo Bioworks, which is a Boston-based company that builds data foundry for engineering of microbes, as well as digital health companies such as Hinge Health, musculoskeletal pain, and Caption Health.
You guys are going to have to really speak a lot louder, just so we can all hear you.
Okay.
Maybe we have a microphone.
And we primarily invest at the seed stage, so very first stage of the institutional round.
Stand up. I mean, I even from here.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
really.
Okay.
Stand. We all want to hear what you have.
Do you want me to repeat what I just said?
No, just think about it.
That was my intro.
I'm serious. If you stood up, it would be better.
Okay.
We should all just stay.
Yeah,
moving forward. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay, for you guys to better look at me. I'm Lu. I'm the founder and managing partner of Fusion Fund. Hear me? Well, okay. So based in Palo Alto, doing the early stage tech and healthcare investment across 3 sectors: industry tech, enterprise tech, and healthcare tech. Each fund size is roughly around $100 million. We do seed Series A. Check size range from $1 million to $3 million initial, and also reserve lots of capital for Parada to continue support the founder. And so far, we have 52 portfolio companies across the United States, and we look forward to invest more company, especially in the healthcare sector. Personal story, I was born and raised in the Mongolian because it's hard to meet a Mongolian, so try to highlight that to make an impression. And I was an entrepreneur, was running my own medical device company with my own patent technology for type 2 diabetes diagnostic, which also kind of contributed to the sector focus. We invest a lot of medical devices and AI in healthcare right now. After I sold my company to Boston Scientific, I went to the dark side, started to do investment, and launched Fusion Fund back in 2015. And the future came out from nuclear fusion. We try to leverage, small atom and small resources and capital to be able to generate something dramatically in the future. Thank you.
Hi there. My name is Mir Sangvi. I'm a principal at Digitex Partners. We are an early stage venture capital firm that exclusively invests in the digital health space. And so when I say digital health, we take a pretty broad definition of that. And our definition is basically everything from software, obviously, that's being used by providers or patients and how they could be providing better care or helping diagnose the diseases, or all the way to some sort of medical device that's non-invasive but that is being used in a therapeutic benefit or being used by the frontline staff. And so the big key that we try to use is really how the company may be using data in some angle of either they're creating a moat around what they're doing or actually creating, obviously, the AI or the algorithms that they're developing for treating the disease. Our check size is typically from $2 to $4 million. We focus on mainly Series A, but some seed investments. And we've been doing this for about, we're on our second fund now, 3.5 years. My background is I was a data scientist before hopping over onto the venture capital side. Started as a healthcare policy consultant, so working with Medicare and Medicaid on their Part D prescription drug event, and then did a few different startups in the Bay Area on the data science side.
Hi everyone, I'm Sin Hong. I am originally from Singapore, and so is our fund. We started off in Singapore. We're an early stage global VC though, so we invest across geographies and across different industry verticals. We've been investing since 2005. We have had 5 funds. We're in the process of raising the 6th now. It's a target of 500 million. We've had our first close. And we invest primarily in platforms of deep scientific and technological breakthroughs that are addressing large and growing markets. And these include lots of investments that we've made in the life sciences space. In the life sciences space, we've invested across the entire spectrum, all the way from AI-aided drug discovery, drug delivery, therapeutics, vaccines, novel X-ray imaging modalities. Our typical check size is our sweet spot is about 5 to 10 million, but we have anything from 500,000 all the way to 50 million in check sizes as well. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you everyone for the introductions. I myself also work for a VC fund called DHVC, investing seed and Series A in biotech and technology companies. But let me get right into the conversation. So we talked about in preparation for today's panel, one of the most important questions that always come to mind for both entrepreneurs and investors is that where AI in healthcare really makes a difference. So where is it that you see as an investor in your portfolio that AI is not just a tool that's used for optimizing or improving efficiency on the edge, but really making a difference in how the healthcare is delivered or some innovative and exciting new therapies or diagnostics. So let me start with Lou with Fusion Fund. So you mentioned some of your own experience with starting a company in this space. Where do you see now in the past 6 years, 7 years that deep learning and some of these AI technologies has come around, that AI really makes a difference in healthcare?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. I think first as a former entrepreneur, I definitely see with AI come to the game, definitely bring more traction from the venture capital side to bring more capital to focus on AI in healthcare, which is a good news for lots of healthcare founders. In terms of the play an important role, for me as an investor, we mainly focus, one thing is push the boundary of early stage diagnostic, leverage the deep learning AI to leverage the value of the data, better help no matter cancer diagnostic or heart disease diagnostic, be able to push the boundary to earlier stage. Another thing is the personalization. We have company, for example, they used to still have the medical device piece to do the early stage diagnostic of like small cell cancer. But with the layer of the software, on one side, be able to better integrate other biometrics data to have personalization result. It's a personalized diagnostic result and also contribute to the personalized treatment plan recommendation. Another thing I think is also very good for the platform to integrate with all different types of medical devices. We used to talk about one company, they have to focus on one sector with one device. Now with the software layer, one platform could bundle with so many different types of devices, generate much bigger opportunity for market potential exit, and also be able to integrate all the data together to give a comprehensive diagnostic result. Besides that, we also see new opportunity is AI for mental disease. Mental disease, no matter diagnostic or therapeutics. We do not, to be honest, we don't know much about what triggered the mental disease and how to better collectively find out the reason and also potential contribute to a future therapeutic approach. But now, for the first time in the history with deep learning and with low-cost sensor, we're able to collect so much data and use the data to help us better understand our brain and be able to find out a way to face the challenge of the mental disease.
Mm-hmm. And which of these companies do you see that actually using AI making a difference in patients?
You're giving me an opportunity to promote my own portfolio company. Thank you. One company based in San Francisco called Mission Bell. They Series B stage already and their first institutional investor back in 2015. They were doing microfluidic for single cell early stage single cell sequencing for small cell cancer. And they also use a deep learning layer, be able to do personalized diagnostic result and treatment plan. And for mental disease, personally, I'm very interested in using the new technology to figure out the issue was one thing is dementia, Alzheimer's dementia, AD. Another thing is depression. We have one company called the Savonix based in San Francisco as well, using all this for AI together with a medical device to solve the problem. For example, lots of new data they found out was quite interesting. People always think what triggered dementia is genetic reason, and they found that smoking contribute even higher possibility for potential dementia in the future. So whoever smoke, quit it now.
Fantastic. So this is a very interesting company. You mentioned that using the cognitive test for detecting early signs of dementia. I think you're also an investor in the company. So
Yes. Yeah, we were an early stage investor right before Lou and Savonix.
So can you talk about kind of what promoted you to invest in such a company and what other innovations you see the companies using health records or some sort of test or data to be able to do these early diagnosis.
Yeah, stand up so maybe. So with Savonic specifically, the part that got us interested was they had taken it was a psychotherapist that was that founded the company, so she had some domain expertise, or a lot of domain expertise about what she was trying to do. Personal reason that she was brought the disease, and then found that there was a bottleneck of actually getting psychometric tests done on patients because there were just not that many of these psychotherapists. And so how could you leverage that? Okay, well, let's try to obviously use the iPad, provide this and a software layer that could get a lot of this data in. And then as you're starting to grow, initially, even when we invested, what brought us in was, okay, you have some revenues on actually being used by different customers. Wasn't huge revenues, but the part that got us interested at that point was you have this used, and you've purposefully used this platform to get a lot of data because you understand that right now you have this platform, you need to get even more data so you can actually track the patient across the board. And then at that point, now she's got more revenues and more contracts, and that's when actually Lou came in at the Series A round for that. And then related, actually, another company kind of took a similar approach, but this is the way that I really start to think about it. And again, my background, data science, and so really all AI is really about the data that you're getting. And so this other company called Echo Devices, they have a digital stethoscope. And so initially they FDA cleared, just put this out on Amazon, physicians were buying it. Then what they found is that, okay, we're selling this to physicians, we have 100,000 plus physicians using this. Now they're starting to actually go through the process, and just recently they got FDA breakthrough designation to try to get some algorithms for low injection fraction for actually something that normally can only be done with an echocardiogram, they can start doing with something that point of care for the physician. And so again, using data and actually partnering with the Mayo Clinic to actually get even more data, getting it out there, and then able to use that to get actual labels for their algorithms.
Let me switch gear to another area that AI has made a lot of headlines, drug development and discovery. So Ethan, your fund has invested in a few companies in that area. One of your portfolio, Deep Genomics, recently raised Series B. So can you talk about, obviously it's a very high impact, creating a new drug for patients, how AI helps these type of companies to actually do that or accelerate drug discovery?
Sure. I'll stand a little bit as well. So one of our portfolio companies, Deep Genomics, it has developed core technology that applies deep learning to predict which variant is going to impact splicing and therefore the downstream effect on the protein function. So that's their kind of the core technology they have developed, and they originally wanted to go after diagnostic but decided that therapeutic was much more lucrative route. So using their technology, they're going after rare diseases, genetic rare diseases, to both find the target for these disease areas, especially when you look at, when you scan across the DNA sequence, and you can see which particular gene is going to have downstream impact on the disease phenotype. For example, exon 6 is avoided or skipped, right, based on this particular variant. Maybe we can find a particular therapeutic modality such that by inclusion of this exon 6 via some kind of oligonucleotide therapy that can restore the disease phenotype. So we see the company in 2014, KV Coastal Ventures led the Series A, and they recently closed the Series B round led by Futures Ventures, which is founded by Steve Jurvetson, one of the DFJ partners. The other computational therapeutics company that we have in the portfolio is a company called Aranza. And this is a company where they use multi-omics data based on patients to subpopulate the population of patients across different categories within a particular cancer. So let's say for lung cancer, there could be many different subtypes, right? And then their technology is that they gather multi-omics data from patients from within lung cancer, for example, and then they subpopulate using a very cutting-edge AI clustering approach. And by subpopulation, they can see the genetic drivers for these type of diseases, and therefore find therapeutics that can reverse the phenotype again of these subtypes. So we again invest in the C round. Series A was led by the Medivation team, which is sold to Pfizer for $14 billion, and the VP of research also joined the company as the chief scientific officer to develop drugs and move forward. So we're very excited about that company as well. So these are just two examples where we're seeing AI really cutting edge, deep learning or clustering-based methods that are making a difference in making more precise medicine, more precise targets or precise assets that can benefit patients.
And in your assessment, Ethan, how far away are we before some of these companies actually get drugs into clinical trials? So have some drugs that then in phase 1.
Yeah. So this is really exciting. So both Deep Genomics and Oranza are going to clinic this year. So
that's really important.
Yeah.
Xiang, your company also invested in Atomwise, which is very well known in this space. Can you talk about that company and how it's using AI for drug discovery?
Yeah, so we were part of the Series A for Atomwise. Atomwise is probably one of the most well-known, I think, companies in the AI drug discovery space. They've made a lot of traction, I think, in a lot of different areas, especially in fundraising. Their Series A, they raised a huge amount of money, more than 50 million. And they've signed a lot of deals. To date, I think end of 2019, they've closed about $4.5 billion worth of deals. And we're really seeing, from the time of our investment, all the traction that they've made, right, in terms of every aspect, technology development, hiring, in terms of IP that they're filing. So they filed 12 patents on novel compounds that they discovered, new scaffolds, new compounds. They have 5 joint ventures to date. And so Atomwise is making all these progress, I think, fundamentally because they're one of the first to really apply deep learning convolutional neural networks to the drug discovery process. So instead of using sort of physics-based approach, they're using a probabilistic-based approach and taking an understanding of chemical structures from a first principles basis, using it in a probabilistic manner instead of a physics-based manner. So they're building all these different blocks of how you understand the structure of a protein target, right? The same way I think you would recognize what a cat looks like. Start from the outline of the ear is attached to a head, and the head with the ear with a certain type of nose looks like a cat. And that's the same sort of principle that they're applying to the recognition of the disease targets. And so Atomwise was a real pioneer in this area. We were very attracted to them because of all the data that they showed us, that not only were they applying what was then a fairly novel technique to drug discovery, but also that they had experimental validation. I think this is something that we're going to talk about a little bit, kind of what investors would look for. I think AI is fantastic for hypothesis generation, right? What it allows us to do is to generate hypotheses very, very quickly and fairly cheaply, given the advances in computing infrastructure. But then the real bottleneck is in the experimental validation. And that for us was where Atomwise really excelled. Because they had a unique model, which is now called the AIMS, the Artificial Intelligence Molecular Screen, where they basically take the investors' money and use it to subsidize screens from partners in, say, academia. So to date, they have done, I think this year they'll do like 500 screens. What they do is that academics or partners in small biotechs would apply with a known target. And these targets could overlap. Actually, what we found is several groups would be submitting the same target. That creates a kind of signal around the target. This is potentially a hot target. And what's the good thing about people submitting their targets is they tend to be the KOLs, experts in a particular area of target biology. They have the best assays. So what Atomwise would then do is do a free in silico screen for the potential collaborator. And they do the screen, they send back a plate of, say, 96 well plate of compounds. The academic partner would then screen these on their validated or their gold standard assays, and then send back that information to Atomwise, say, well E1 or well H6 is a hit in my assay, right? So in this way, Atomwise gets a fairly inexpensive and scalable way of rapidly testing their algorithms, right? So experimentally testing. So not only the positive results would be great for both parties because then they could share in the upside together. There's opportunities for joint ventures, for licensing deals, because they keep that information about what the compounds are exactly proprietary to Atomwise, but will be shared, in the partnership. And also the compounds that didn't work out, right? The negative data also helps to train data. So this is the way, I think, going back to what Miraj is saying, what we saw was a very clever way to use our money very efficiently to get a lot of data, right? To validate experimentally all the different hypotheses that they were generating. And so this is something that was very attractive to us. I think it's really borne fruit. Bayer just took up their option with Atomwise licensed compound that they had developed for agricultural purposes. Again, something that we were very attracted by, where the chemistry is similarly complex, but you're developing for a protein target in agriculture. It's similarly complex to when you're trying to develop for medicines, right? So, but there, by developing for agriculture, you learn everything you need to learn and optimize the algorithm, but you're not threatening big pharma. And so then big pharma loves to partner with them. AbbVie, Genentech, and various companies have partnered with them very successfully as well. So these are the various reasons why we liked Atomwise and why I think Atomwise is continuing to do very well. Thank you.
That's fantastic. So let me switch the gear a little bit and talk about an area that in the past couple of years has become really important and topic of concern and discussion in the public, and that's about data privacy. So, Lou, Miraj, you both talked about how your portfolio companies are using data for better personalized medicine and better personalized care. So we have heard the news recently that Google has been digesting a lot of electronic health records in the contracts they have for millions of people. And that has caused some people really to be anxious how my data is being used. So what do you see some of the challenges are, where the line is, that how much we can improve the delivery of care with personalized data versus how much people can get privacy, or how does it affect them?
Yeah, so I definitely think privacy is a big issue. And on top of that, there's also, just recently there was this article about how there's millions of medical images that are actually out there that aren't properly secure and able to be accessed by different nefarious parties. And so definitely privacy in general is definitely a very, very big cause of concern. I think part of the way that I at least think about it is, on the one hand, there is a certain amount of data that you need for your algorithm to run. But then I think an other side of AI that now only people are starting to talk about a little bit is how the bias that you may be thinking, how that kind of proceeds, goes into the algorithm. And so I think with that, obviously, you want to try to create some sort of layer of privacy for the patient data. But it's a hard problem because I think that for sure, academic institutions are starting to not be as scared about it, and so they're actually opening up their data to different companies. The companies need that to actually provide better care and provide algorithms that are going to be used. And so it really does come down to just making sure that the conversation is happening and that as a patient that you know what's happening with your data. HIPAA gives a patient the right to do it and to share that data or not. And I think that actually, honestly, it's something that we as a society haven't really talked about that much, because I freely give my data to Google and they know more about me than my doctor does because of how and even Apple knows more about me than my doctor does because of how I use my phone, how much I check my email, just everything that's going on. And so those are services that I've either paid for or given away for free. And I think that that's definitely going to continue into healthcare. I personally don't have the right answer for that. I don't know how to properly make sure that that's taken care of, but I think that it is a good sign that at least we're talking about it. Obviously, selfishly for our companies, we do want them to get enough data that allows them to do what they want to do, but we do try to at least morally make sure that what they're doing is not either hurting the patient or hurting what they're trying to do, but is actually going to help the physician do something or create more efficiencies for either how they're providing their care or potentially get new patients or detect some sort of disease earlier and provide that information back to the patient so that they can actually do something with that versus then selling that back to the employer or anything like that, which again, is happening with some other companies. So definitely a hard problem and something that we should continue talking about.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a pretty hard problem to solve, and I don't think as an investor or founder, we could really put in efforts from our end to be able to solve it. But definitely, I think the most important thing is we need to realize what is the trend right now. The trend is the digitalization of everything. Through the internet, we basically finish the digitalization of the individual. We basically like 60%, 70% digital profile online available already. Now the whole industry and enterprise is going through this trend. When we need definitely better regulation, not only protect the data privacy, another thing is very important to protect our digital asset. We haven't have a clear definition what is a digital asset. It's defined of the ownership, storage rights, etc. Definitely regulation is ongoing. We need better engagement between Silicon Valley and Washington DC and also large corporate to be able to have a comprehensive regulation. It definitely needs more discussion as well. Besides that, I think there are some existing technology potentially could be a supporter of potentially solving this issue. For example, we invest a lot in edge computing as well. Edge computing has also application in the network technology already, but it could be a potential solution for the data privacy in healthcare sector as well. Why we always worry about data leakage? Because we upload everything to the cloud or maybe one central data place. And when your data got leaked out, my data at risk as well. Now with edge computing solution, we enable the local devices become the smart machine, and they could process some not like preliminary data set, local, and give instant feedback. On one side, definitely higher efficiency because it's instant feedback, but on the other side, most importantly, we have much lower risk of the potential leakage of the data, abuse of the data usage. And we also saw other companies, they try to do, for example, they build an independent third party, try to process the data from the clinic and hospital. They have a better infrastructure to put a layer of protection before transfer this data to startup company or big corporate to use it. That become a potential solution in the future as well. And at the end, one point I want to bring up is how we really use the right perspective to encourage all the interested party to be part of this discussion. When people talk about privacy, and we start a battle right away that you as a big corporate, Google use my data, and you as a large corporate, you definitely benefit from using individual data. But from our introduction with a Fortune 500 company, they have this new title called Chief Digital Officer. Try to figure out how they handle the data, how to really better evaluate the value of the data, how to really define, draw the line to avoid the future liability for them to use the individual data. So they were worried about it as well. That's the reason since 2 years ago, I was pushing this idea of don't talk about privacy only, we talk about the digital asset. When it become an asset, no matter our digital data from individual, enterprise, or industry, everyone have a sense of urgency to defend their asset, protect their asset, also find a better approach, most efficient way to collaborate with each other to make the most from their asset, how to better pay for the service using our digital asset. I think that might be the potential right solution for us to really discuss about the regulation and also be able to build up this collaboration across different layers to make the regulation really work.
Thank you. Definitely very interesting conversation. Data is often described as the bottleneck for AI. So for this conversation, hopefully in the next few years, we'll see what happens in the industry. Let me, Ethan, talk about what do you see in terms of let's take a glimpse into the future. So we talked about some of the companies, existing companies in the portfolio. But when you meet with entrepreneurs or you have an advice for an entrepreneur who wants to start a company in this area, looking 5 years down the road, what kind of opportunities do you think that are emerging? And what are some of the other areas that you feel actually are saturated and not as exciting and fruitful as much?
Thank you for that question, Ali. So I think, given our focus on the frontier side, we really look for technology that are novel and solutions that are novel and emerging, right? Because especially we focus on the C stage, looking for companies with that novelty such that they will survive the Series A and Series B further down the line. So based on my focus on the computational biology side, therapeutic side, there's been an influx of so many different companies that apply to AI to the drug discovery, drug development. And I think there's still a lot of problems that need to be solved in the whole process of making a drug, from in vitro assays to preclinical to the clinical stage. But when you look at websites of these companies, it's so hard to distinguish, right, one from the other, because they all say they do the same thing. AI-based drug design, like what does that mean? So I think that place is getting increasingly crowded, per your question. At the same time, I think there's still really large problems that need to be solved in the drug discovery, drug development process. And that's something I continue to look at and talk to companies in that space, almost every one of them, to make sure that what they're solving is meaningful and provide advice based on what I see and what they're similar to. So it's area number one. It's fairly crowded, but I think there's still opportunity there because the problem is so large. Looking forward, I'm looking out for into several different areas that I think would be really interesting. I think we're starting to get into the decade or 2 decades of neuroscience, based on what Lou was mentioning about mental health. I think bringing technology to extract signals and stimulate the brain on a very high spatial resolution and temporal resolution will be really interesting. And we don't have the right tools right now that can extract non-invasively to do both high spatial and high temporal. So maybe further tool development on that front. And the second part, maybe we can leverage the data that we get so far from EEG signals or fMRI signals to really understand what our brain is thinking, correlate to certain phenotype of function that can be used as diagnostic tools or therapeutic development tools. So all of these, we start to see non-invasive stimulation of the vagus nerve for various bodily functions, such as appetite suppression, sleep, all are very relevant to our human health. So that's one area that I'm particularly excited about. Also looking into the intersection of AI and medical device, continue to do that. So how, because of maturation of the AI technologies in automation and prediction, combined with the robotics and surgical robotics, we can see perhaps more automated guidance on treating patients and automating procedures that are less error prone. So those are the three kind of the main areas that I'm particularly excited about on kind of the frontier side. And of course, there's no way that I can cover all ideas that are coming up. So it's really up to the entrepreneurs or you guys to really think of things that I missed, right? And something that could be novel and that we can benefit as a healthcare system or society.
To other panelists, what's most exciting areas you see and fundamental areas you see in AI and healthcare?
I'll take that. Yeah, so if we take a step back from all, I think we've been focusing a lot on companies, and I just want to take a step back and look at the macro picture of what we're trying to achieve with all of this, right? So I think fundamentally, and we're a global fund, so we have this sort of global perspective, right? Fundamentally, I think all healthcare systems are trying to address the AAA problem, I call it. One is access, second is affordability, and third is accuracy. So basically, patients want to see good doctors as quickly as possible whenever they need them. They want to be able to pay for the doctors, usually as little as possible. And they want to be diagnosed and treated with the best medicines as accurately as possible. So if you then look, as we do, globally, across, we believe innovation happens everywhere, and in every healthcare system, people are trying to solve these three fundamental issues. So you actually we see lots of technology being developed in various parts of the world that are actually sort of thematically pretty similar. But the opportunity is that while the technology and the talent and the infrastructure could be global, the data, the payment, the regulation, the implementation is pretty local. So there's actually a lot of opportunity, I think, in terms of localizing, personalizing, executing, and the local stage. So in terms of the themes of what we like to see, we're looking for platforms that can scale globally, but address problems locally. And actually, we're a team of a pretty interesting, diverse mix of backgrounds. So we have people who are ex-government, people from finance, medical doctors, engineers. Myself, I'm a PhD scientist. I used to be a professor in medical school. So we look at problems very, very differently. So I give you some examples from our portfolio where you may not initially think of it as AI in health, but it's turned out that way. I give you an example, say, from the performance management field. So we have a company called KPI Soft. They're a company that's based in KL, but now they have a global presence. And what they have is a SaaS platform that is meant to simplify the process of monitoring whether or not staff are meeting their KPIs. They've used it all the way from sales management, Salesforce management, to monitoring the performance of machines in a mining operation in one of Indonesia's largest conglomerates. And the same tool could be used to apply, to study the reliability of, say, medical devices in a hospital setting, as well as the performance of clinicians. And this is exactly what they're doing in the Southeast Asian countries right now. I'll give you another example, Snapcart, which is a retail big data analytics play. So retail big analytics, what does that have to do with healthcare? So it turns out that the way they execute is by having users download an app and then snapping photographs of receipts that they, that they get whenever they buy goods at, say, in Indonesia or in the Philippines. And so those are economies where a lot of transactions are still offline. A lot of information is in paper receipts. But what you then get is a very accurate picture of what people are actually buying, the basket of goods, which can include medicines, certain types of medicines. They have the largest inventory of SKUs in many of these local countries. And so they then know which people are buying what sort of medicines. They know their demographic. They know what their purchasing history has been. So you can then think about, again, access, affordability, accuracy. The one key way of achieving all that is by disease monitoring, health monitoring in a larger scale. So if you then know what people are buying, what sort of medicines they're buying, this is like Google flu on steroids, right? So you're not just looking at keywords, but you're looking at purchasing decisions when people have actually bought medicines. You can actually have a stab at predicting what sort of illnesses people are going to, how are they buying medicines to treat it, what sort of medicines they're buying, is that accurate given their clinical history? So again, you can think laterally and expand beyond that. And of course, in terms of the specific geographies that we see, China is particularly interesting. China is an area where these issues are particularly prominent. You have the understanding of what some of the local nuances are very important. But a lot of the people in China, there are lots of doctors, but they don't necessarily trust the doctors in the first and second tier hospitals. Everyone wants to see a doctor in the third tier hospitals because there's basically a shortage of highly qualified, trained doctors. They simply don't trust the medical decisions that these doctors in the first and second tier hospitals make. So what AI can do is really democratize access to these higher quality medical services, right? So we're actively looking at opportunities that really allow the sharing of these services, not just in China, but these could be something that's developed in, say, the US, but adopted to a Chinese system. And I think to end off with the example of Atomwise as well. So Atomwise is a company where we see exactly, it's a global platform. It's based in the US. They're discovering drugs better, faster, cheaper, and doing a lot more of it, even more than Big Pharma is doing. But they can work with anyone all over the world. And we're embedding them right now in Southeast Asia, in Singapore, where we have deep roots, helping them collaborate and become structurally embedded in the drug discovery system in Singapore, where academics are discovering new targets, they're developing new assays for diseases that are maybe more particular to Southeast Asia, to Singapore, but where there is a bandwidth constraint in the amount of chemistry that they can do, right? The drug development unit can only handle so many targets at once. They were very, very selective. An AI-driven approach can really help to democratize access for drug discovery services. And once, the idea is that AI is not going to replace everything, but what it does is that it helps to improve access, right? It allows people to then at least have a hit, and then you can take it from a hit to a lead. Whereas previously they may not even have an opportunity to have a hit at all. And I think this is where AI can really make a big impact globally.
Wonderful example. So we have a couple of minutes before we get to audience's question. So let me ask you, Miraj, so similar question, so about where innovation areas you'd like to see from entrepreneurs and pitching, but also what validation points do you usually look at to see those opportunities that the entrepreneurs should think about when they're pitching events?
Yeah, I think other direction, other panelists just mentioned that definitely are the interesting sector for us as well. But plus, another sector I thought is booming right now, especially related to YM, is female tech. So lots of new innovation has brought in for female-focused healthcare innovation, and also because of lack of female entrepreneur and female investor in the tech and healthcare sector, it's kind of big opportunity being overlooked for the past couple of years. I have a company got acquired by P&G early last year. It's a female healthcare company done by a female founder. They gave me 10x multiple within 3 years. Why? Because they only raised $1.9 million. And why only $1.9 million? Because they had a hard time to raise money. So I think that become a kind of unique opportunity for both investor and founder, especially thinking about some like technology specific focus on female healthcare related use case. Another thing is how to better combine the healthcare innovation with insurance tech. Like when we talk about insurance tech in the past couple of years, people all think about fintech. But the insurance industry now is deeply bundled with healthcare innovation because they're the one handle the burden. For example, when we have aging population, insurance company has much huge like increase of the burden when they have more patients suffer from dementia compared with cancer. So we have company including Celonex that are working with insurance company and other cancer diagnostic company that are working with insurance company try to provide a better solution, and the insurance company could become their distribution channel. So how to better combine these two could be a unique opportunity in the near future as well. And besides that, your second part of the question is
What validation points?
the validation points. Yeah, that's actually become quite challenging for lots of traditional medical device company, I believe. Our approach is we kind of, that's one of our value add. We launched the CXO network last year with less than 30 C-level CTO, CIO, CDO, the chief digital officer from all different type of Fortune 500 company. So what we do is once we put in the initial check before Series A or C stage, the company is still pre-FDA approval, but they potentially could provide the technology as a service to, for example, Johnson & Johnson, for Medtronic, for this large potential strategic partner in the future. So we built out this connection for them early on, and they were able to get some early revenue as a market validation, and also be able to leverage the partner's distribution channel to do quicker development. And later on, after they raise more money, start FDA approval, the data set could also help them to get FDA approval much faster. Like most of our medical device plus AI healthcare company in the past 2 years, they got FDA 510K clearance within half a year. I have two companies got two FDA clearance within 1 year because they use this approach to collect a comprehensive data set at early stage. I think there's different type of game plan founder could explore, but be creative. And also always think about the long-term planning rather than short-term planning, and try to find a way to engage all different interest payer, buyer, and also the strategic partner at earlier stage. Make them become one of your potential interest owner, our shareholder, then will help you better achieve the market validation.
Wonderful. Niraj, your thoughts and also your closing remarks.
Yeah, okay. Well, first of all, I'll start with the closing. Thanks for everyone for being here, especially after lunch, and for staying awake. So with an area that people haven't really talked about that is one that I've been spending a lot of time thinking about is biomarkers, different biomarkers that could be used to really understand a little bit more of the human body and how what's going on with the patient. I mean, I think that there's a reason that a lot of the AI that's been happening, a lot of it has been on the images and on pathology, and I know the next panel is going to be talking about that. And partly that's because the data set there is a little bit cleaner and you're understanding what you're working with. And one area that I definitely think that can be helpful is physicians, when they're working and treating a disease, a lot of it is still qualitative, and there still is a lot of pattern recognition that they're using. And if you can start finding a way that you can take some of that signal and actually standardize it in a better biomarker, if it's whatever that is, either the way that the heart is beating or different EEG signals from the gut or different ways that could be done, then that allows for, then you have good data that you can then build an algorithm off of. And so I think that that's an area that I've definitely been spending a decent amount of time on. And related with that, two areas that definitely have gotten a lot of interest, voice, and that part of the reason is, again, if you can standardize that vocal biomarker, then you can tie that to different diseases and you can catch diseases on an earlier state. And another area that I think is very interesting that the research is really starting to take off is microbiome. And again, this is an area that just 5 years ago people laughed at and didn't think it was that interesting, but now more and more evidence is starting to come out about how that's tied to neurological diseases, how that's tied to many different diseases in the body, how that is a lot of the inflammation that's happening in the body, and how it's all really tied together. And so I think that as you can start quantifying that, I think that that's really where there's a lot of interest, and tied to validation, that anything early that you can do to prove that either there's other body of evidence that the company's building off of, and why what they're going to be building is they don't need to reinvent the wheel on what's going on, like what Ethan talked about, vagal nerve stimulation. That's been studied for a long time. Okay, now there are new ways to do that the company could do that already been proved for many different diseases, and doing this is building off of that. Or are there other ways that they could either work with academic centers to actually start getting that early validation to help them prove why they can do what they can do? Because really, at our stage in Series A, I mean, for us, we know we're taking a lot of risk, but we want just help from you guys on, if you're building a company, how can you take some of that risk off so that we understand that, okay, yeah, we see the full goal. We know that at a Series A, especially healthcare, we're not going to have large seven-figure revenues. We're not an enterprise tech. And so if it's not going to be revenues, if you don't have all the customers, how can you take a little bit of that validation or a little bit of that risk off the table to show that you're onto something and prove to us that?
Great, thank you. So it seems if you have a microbiome startup, you're already ready to wire the money. Wonderful. So thank you so much, all the panelists, for your thoughtful comments. And so let me just turn to, we have, I think, a couple of minutes from the audience, if any questions. Yes, please. And please speak up, because here may be here.
I'm working on an AI company. My company is doing, I own a local AI technology for the recycling risk disease, and the aim is to practice cancer detection and treatment. And I heard all the investors, the panelists discussion, very exciting, and including you. And so my question is that one major question to hold you is the market. I see you said something like, for example, you classified the based on genes for different cancer, something, who's going to pay for it? And you can design early for example, insurance payers, insurance company or something, but the reality is where it's going to help. But what's your suggestion and how to help the whole field to go to touch the bottom, the ground for the market?
Okay, so I think if I got your question correctly, you're asking there's a technology that can help you discover novel biomarkers that can help you diagnose subset of disease, right? So that in itself is a diagnostic pathway, right, through the FDA, whereas the company that I was mentioning, they're developing therapeutics based on those biomarker potential targets. So it's a very different pathway, so that the willingness to pay is very different from a payer standpoint. I think from a diagnostic standpoint, it's a very different conversation, because for this type of diagnostic, you need to prove to the payers, the insurance companies, an ROI or health economics about why should they pay for your test, and that's usually driven by the cost savings that's being or potential outcome, better outcome that's being brought on by your technology. So I hope that's answering your question in the sense that that's what they probably want to see.
Yeah, the reason I understand, for example, if you talk to peer, you're going to answer how they real money for the insurance. But if, for example, you go for this startup try to classify something the biomarkers, then if somehow to my sense is somehow more academic. So I'm also was a professor and work on this, and I see many companies even go to B or C rounds. I do real work some for like academic. So I really think the whole field, I was thinking how the whole field to catch up to get the money.
So if I may interject, I think we have only a few minutes before we clear the room. So everybody is going to stick around for more questions from you, and Izan and Kevin follow up for the question you had. So thank you so much, all the panelists, for joining.